Coming to you from UBN Studios in Burbank, California. You're listening to the Unsugarcoated Podcast with your host, Aalia.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of your favorite social good podcast. I am so happy to be here with you today, and I'm actually really excited to have this conversation with you. For so many reasons. So some of you guys, we're continuing on the unsugarcoated theme, the unsugarcoated movement. What is unsugarcoated? Well, unsugarcoated is having a lot of different conversations with different perspectives, different experiences, and mind you, so much value. I really love that part of what I do. And, if you haven't been paying attention, like the philosophies, the theories, the backbone of this organization, being Unsugarcoated Media, and really meaning me, is that we are about integrity, we're about healing, we're about seeing our communities for what they are, what they can be, and how far we need to go to get them there, right? Ourselves included. And there's so many things that are available to us, but a lot of belief systems of our worlds, of our grandfathers or our mothers' thinkings, whatnot, whatever the case may be, have changed over time. But I'm going to tell you on the thought of cannabis, I'm almost certain that one of my ancestors somewhere along the way was definitely using cannabis as a holistic method for whatever it has been passed down. But somewhere along the line, right, this new belief system came in and said cannabis is bad. Cannabis is a gateway drug. Cannabis will cause you to sit on your couch and eat cereal all day long instead of get up and go being a contributing member of society. Well, you see, I didn't actually use cannabis in my youth, but I had an uncle. I have an uncle who is this amazing architect, engineer, badass, could look at a building and tell you everything about it. It was just incredible. And that man smoked weed every single day. I will never forget him coming home from a day's work, going and getting a bowl with his wife in the garage, and then coming in, busting out the guitar and singing a song with me as a kid. Like, I don't know how to explain to you that it was one of the most wholesome and wonderful environments to be in. Now, I'm not saying that cannabis was the only thing making that happen, but that uncle and aunt that I'm talking about, they've been married for 30 plus years. And every day my uncle walks in the house, my aunt is still saying, "Hi, honey, where have you been? Hi, love." When he leaves, it's "I love you." And, I'm not going to lie. When cannabis got introduced into my life and I look back retrospectively at how their emotions were handled and how their day-to-day life went, I am not going to lie. I'm wondering if the reason they were so happy is because cannabis was part of their formula. So with that, clearly you have figured out our conversation today is going to be about cannabis. And for those of you who don't remember my story, I had not really messed with cannabis until I was diagnosed with cancer. I had just gotten out of the hospital. I was about 99 pounds. I could not eat more than a handful of food without getting really, really sick. And that was difficult because nobody wants to eat when it's painful. But I was at one of my friend's house who took me over. She took me over to her house because I had just gotten out of the hospital. And she had me stay with her, so I was not alone. And she just looked at me. She says, "You know what you need? You need to smoke some weed, Aalia." I was like, and if you've had cancer, you're just about willing. And I did. I tried a multitude of things that smelled like somebody had died. But I would drink it by the gallon if you told me it might cure my cancer. So when she said, "Smoke this joint and you might feel better," I was willing to try it. So I can tell you, subsequently, I ended up going to McDonald's and eating 2 cheeseburgers, chicken nuggets, a shake, and a sundae. I felt so good. I'm being honest with you. It's funny, but I'm being honest with you so that you have a perspective that cannabis is not just used for one thing, and that while it's not for everybody, it does not mean that people using it are always using it to get high or be stupid or watch really good Dave Chappelle films from back in the day. Like, that's just not what it's about. And I have somebody who I'm so excited to have this conversation with, because in the vein of what cannabis can do for you, for an individual, potentially personally, what it can do for you as a business, right? Because this is a multi-billion-dollar space. If we are allegedly this wonderful country that provides opportunity for everybody, then why now that it's becoming decriminalized is the government trying so hard to get their hands on something that everyone should actually have an opportunity to get in on? I mean, that's just one thought I have on it, but that's really, not our entire focus. But for the people in the cannabis industry, we're definitely talking to the right person to discuss what are the challenges and who better to speak to than our upcoming guest. So without further ado, let's get started. Matt Gray is designing his business on a foundation of integrity and trust, and he is a cannabis entrepreneur who aims to raise the standards bar with the ever-evolving industry. As the CEO of Herb, Matt features an extensive background involving business development, full-spectrum distribution, and quality assurance, and enjoys every moment of exceeding customer expectations while helping vetted cannabis brands gain the rightful exposure they deserve. Matt has created various assets, including Carbon X, Bitmaker, which was acquired by General Assembly, Gray, Herb Highware, and of course Herb, which has become the largest cannabis company worldwide with 14 million plus members and has been backed by the CEO of Shopify, Facebook, and among several others. He is a trailblazing professional driven by quality, and he has a genuine passion for creating the most vetted weed guide on the cannabis market today. Matt is an industry leader that is committed to forming an empowering cannabis community that inspires others, surface authenticity, and unlock their full potential. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Matt Gray.
Thank you so much for having me, Aalia. It's great to be here.
Thank you. I know you're not in studio, so tell me, where are you speaking to us today from?
I'm in WeHo. I just got my U.S. visa here a few weeks back, so I've officially moved to L.A. from Toronto, Canada, where I'm originally from.
Oh, all right. Okay, you're in WeHo. You're on my side of the town then. But yes, wonderful. Okay, awesome. So thank you for being here. By the time this airs, of course, we're still in 2021, but by the time this airs, it will be 2022. A lot of changes have happened in the past couple of years that I'm very thankful to have your kind of feedback on. But before we do, you say you discovered early on the true meaning behind resilience, individuality, and the art of using natural remedies to target tailored treatment needs. What exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah, so going back to, when I was 8 years old, I had a very close friend of mine who was suffering from depression, was put on a concoction of different harmful pharmaceuticals that had a really tricky, impact on his system. And this kind of cocktail of different antidepressants and antipsychotics ended up driving him suicidal. And over the course of 5 years, this individual, one of my best friends in life, attempted suicide 3 different times. And this sort of experience growing up at a young age really showed me that sometimes, these typical sort of Western methods of kind of pills over any sort of natural remedies can have really negative impacts. And so this experience really opened my eyes to some of the harm that can be done sometimes through these traditional methods. This friend of mine was able to eventually use much more natural remedies as well as cannabis to help with the issues that he was facing. It really transformed his life. And this experience growing up really sort of transformed my thinking in terms of how cannabis can really impact people on the positive side. Over the years building Herb, we've seen thousands of people that have been impacted, whether it's simple things like helping them with sleep, all the way to veterans and helping them with PTSD and everything in between. And so, I think there's an amazing impact to this plant. And the stigma is slowly but surely changing.
I think what you are doing is incredible because I feel that this day and age, it's very important to have control of the narrative, which it gets away from us at times. To the point I was saying earlier with people often having this assumption that you're using cannabis to get high and, whatever. And it's not. There's very purposeful. And to your other point of there's more than one way to find that remedy. I remember when I got sick, I was given a prescription, for an antidepressant. And my doctor said, okay, now. And he was giving it to me because I was actually going through my battle and I'd had some mental health challenges. And he says, well, here, let me give you an antidepressant. He says, now, this may make you want to kill yourself. And I'm like, whoa, what does he said? And it may even make you a little homicidal. So if you start to have any of these thoughts, please let me know immediately. And I'm like, wait, what? So I get that. Like, it is true. And, there's so many side effects. And like I said in my intro, there was this one root. It was a Chinese root. I would go into this Chinese store with the apothecary and everything, and I'm like, okay, this is what I have. He would come back, and I had to boil it. Let me tell you, Matthew, this thing smelled like somebody died. I'm not kidding. And I would put lemon in it and some honey to try and have it on my nose. But we want to live. We want to live the best life possible. And for survivors of trauma, as you pointed out with the VA, which is definitely one of the things that's lined up in my notes for some of the challenges, it is so sad that people don't recognize that this can benefit PTSD, and that so many of us don't know how to own up to the traumas that we have, and how cannabis genuinely can help you in a way to see those mental deficiencies different, right? Like, you just assess things different, in my personal experience. Now, what do you think about how cannabis impacts the survivors of trauma community?
Yeah, so I mean, I think everyone needs to go on their own journey in terms of what's right for them. I think there's a lot of people that traditional pharmaceuticals work great, and that's awesome. For those, though, that feel like there's other paths that they should be going, like cannabis, to help them, I think those doors need to be open. It's a sad world where when people are suffering that deeply, doors like cannabis are being closed, and the stigma exists when these people are just trying to get some sort of relief from some serious issues that they may be facing. I think that at the end of the day, what we're trying to do here with herb, and where I see the future, is that cannabis is in many ways similar to coffee in a sense, right? It's part of an otherwise vibrant life, and something that people should be able to choose to use as another ingredient in their life, and not something they should feel stigmatized for, or something that should be overly demonized for using. And the reality is that there are a lot of people that are suffering from pain, whether it be mental or physical. Cannabis is proven to help with many of these ailments. And I think that it needs to be a viable option for people, and something that we need to reduce the stigma on and legalize here in the US.
Yes, you on your words, the one that came to mind was decriminalization. You are involved with an amazing project called the Last Prisoners Project. Would you mind sharing a bit about that? I know you sit on the board, but it surrounds that part of the conversation.
Yeah, so the goal of Last Prisoner Project is to free the 40,000 people that are incarcerated for cannabis in the United States alone. This is a travesty in many senses. It's like modern day slavery. This is disproportionately affecting Black and brown communities, and is something that's ridiculous. You think about all the entrepreneurs that are going and making money in states like California and Colorado. And meanwhile, you have 40,000 people that are incarcerated for cannabis in the US. And so the goal of this organization is to raise awareness, is to fundraise to help fund the release of people, and then the helping these people re-enter society after, get real jobs, whether it be in cannabis or pursuing their dreams. And so this is something I feel really passionate about. It's amazing to see the groundswell of action happening across many entrepreneurs and brands across the cannabis industry, but there's still a long road to go. And, I think it's about time, now with Biden in office, it'd be great to see some momentum on this front, although things seem to be kind of quiet, or quieter than I'd like to see them.
Right. I commend you so much. I think that sometimes people forget that a lot of people go to jail for crimes related to cannabis, and they get way ridiculous type of sentences. I thought that this project was amazing because I myself knew a girl in grade school who, she had her father in prison because he was a grower in Eureka. I grew up in Napa, so Eureka, it was not a shocker there if you correlate that my uncle used cannabis. But I remember being so sad for her because her dad died while in prison from cancer, and she never got to know him because of cannabis. And I thought that was not justice, And so when you hear of stories, especially with regards to minority communities, we know white people smoke weed just as much as every other color. And, it's unfair. But that what we know is that even though that's the case, most often minorities are specifically targeted and therefore end up more often arrested in the criminal system, which is a whole mess into itself. So I feel that it would give so many more young men and women opportunities that they do deserve for something that should never really have been criminalized in the first place. So, you know, when it comes to destigmatizing it, I know I've faced the challenge. I'm a mom, right? I'm a mom. So when I go to the PTA meeting, they don't like it when they say, "What are you doing later, Aalia?" "Oh, I'm going to have some wine. I'm going to smoke my weed." You know? No, I try to say cannabis so they stop looking at me like that. But there's a sense of shame that I know they can try to pull on me, but good thing I don't care. I'm like, you know, I feel like we need more people like that because there's too many of the negative Nancys who want to frown upon women. Do you guys experience kind of the same thing in the men's demographic?
Yeah, I think, you know, across the board, you know, there's just different cultural views, different generational views to cannabis. And I think it speaks a lot to just how successful the propaganda has been over the years around cannabis, you know, from all the way back to, you know, the 20s to now. You know, the reality is that many people grew up and the messaging was a lot different than where we're at today with, you know, a lot of people, you know, 71% of Americans believing that cannabis should be legalized in the US. So it's great to see the tides changing, but yeah, I think people across the board have experienced their own stigmas, whether it's with their family, going to different settings outside of, you know, typical friends that maybe are consuming cannabis. And I think it depends on what states you're in. Whenever I'm in, you know, California, obviously, I find it super open-minded. Same thing in Canada, where it's the first G8 country to legalize cannabis. But you know, there's other states you may go to where it's a little bit more out of the norm and a little bit more stigmatized.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we're dealing with some stuff in the studio, so forgive if whoever's watching the visual, you're seeing it. Okay, it was bright. I looked, you know, whatever. My guys are like, I try. Sometimes they put the lights on me. It's so bright, and I like disappear in the background. I'm like, I promise, I'm a brown girl. You just can't see it. So I'm always getting. But we love it. We're so unsugar-coated here. You know, okay, yeah. So speaking to that, so you're from Ontario. You are the oldest of 5 siblings. Good job. Were you a good big brother? You good?
Did my best. Yeah, I think I was all right.
How much smaller? How much younger are they than you?
So the youngest is a decade younger than me. And then I'm 32, 31-year-old brother, 27-year-old sister, another 25-year-old, and then 22.
Okay, so yeah, like you guys were really. I mean, how do they feel about what you do? I mean, does your family? It seems like a great family feeling usually of that size. So do they support you as well?
So I mean, starting off, I think I came from starting and selling a technology education company prior to Herb, and initially when I got started, I think a lot of people, not just my family, but my parents and others, were a bit surprised at my choice to get into this industry. And I think it was quite the shock. And many people were like, "Are you all right? Like, is everything okay?" So definitely felt the stigma around entering, 7 years ago, what was a pretty nascent industry. Over the years, I think, people start to see your intentions, start to see the mission and the vision of what you're trying to do. And as you start to gain more traction, momentum, and times change, and general sentiment changes of it across, obviously Canada, where it's been legalized since I started, and in the US, where another 26 states have legalized. I think they've gradually come to support me. I don't know if they support necessarily cannabis fully, to be honest with you, but support me and want to see me do all right. So I mean, for firsthand experience, I think I'm kind of grateful for all of that, though, because it allows you to empathize with those that are being stigmatized for their cannabis use. And I know kind of how thick that stigma can be based on some of my experiences in my life.
Yeah, that's incredibly important. And I really appreciate that you say it, because most people would just say, "Oh, well, his family probably all supports him." And, but there is sometimes points in your life where you believe in something that maybe others don't see. They don't have the vision, but that's their issues, right? Like you learned to step forward. Was there anything in particular that caused you to not back down and say, "Oh, well, maybe I should," as opposed to what you did do, which was move forward in this industry?
I mean, I think a lot of it, I just reflect on my own philosophy. It's like if I think I had the kind of parents that, would be encouraging you to be an accountant or a lawyer, or these sorts of careers, right? Which I knew would never make me happy. And so if you take their advice, you're going to be going down those roads of careers that you have no interest in. And when I was 24, I knew I had no interest doing those things. So at a certain juncture, I think you just need to grow up and, you got to make choices for yourself. And, if you're acting with integrity and you have a vision that you believe is pure and is really going to help people and help the world, I think you just need to go and get after it and, hope that one day people will understand. And if they do, that's great. And if they don't, that's awesome too. And there's, you don't need to worry about it. So I think there's just a level of independence and just conviction you need to have around whatever you're starting.
I have a quick little story I want to share. And in the meantime, I want to ask you to consider a story, a moment, if you will, something that was very pivotal in your early entrepreneurship journey. I just want to, when you were speaking, it made me reflect on a time when I was a teenager and I had a pastor who had this hunk of junk. It was literally like 4 wheels. It was a frame. It was cobwebs. I was like, what are we doing? He's like, we're going to restore this car. I'm like, what? So, I remember kind of saying like, okay, but I remember everyone else was like, no, what's going on? Naysayers. Nobody believed. Now, while I didn't have his vision, I thought, okay. And then I'll never forget the day that it came back on a flatbed and the body had been put on. And then we had gone through and buffed all the chrome and everything. Let me tell you, this was a 1956 Chevy Bel Air, that by the time this thing was done, it was beautiful. It was stunning. And when he drove down the street, everyone honked and waved. It was just one of those cars. But see, nobody saw that. Nobody saw his vision. So for you, what was a pivotal moment as you go in this vision of creating this organization of integrity, knowing that there's a stigma attached to it, but yet you move forward?
Yeah. So I think on that side of things, again, with the involvement with Herb as well as on the Last Prisoner Project side, one example of what comes to mind is we had, through the work with Last Prisoner Project, had heard about a gentleman named Corvain Cooper, who was locked up for life without parole for cannabis, which is absolutely insane. Corvain was caught with cannabis in Los Angeles, somehow was shipped across to Louisiana to a maximum security prison where he was locked up there for life. And so this story caught our attention, my team's attention, my attention, and we knew we needed to make a difference. After talking more and learning more about Corvain's family, his daughters, it became obvious too that, he had a younger daughter, Claire, who, just wanted to see her father on her graduation day. And so we kind of rallied as a team and started creating, a real sort of movement around this and trying to get the word out there as much as possible around Corvain's story, the travesty of him being locked up for life without parole, just for something that's legal in 26 states and that many people are, making money, and there's real legal businesses off this in places like California. And, the industry started banding together. There was a lot of organizations involved, like Last Prisoner Project and many others. And he was eventually pardoned by Trump about a year ago now. And so I think, at a certain juncture, there's just some of these stories you may hear that although, the law stands on one side, your own values, your own morals, and may stand on another. And I think at some juncture, you kind of really need to take a stand for what you believe in. And when something's not right, and when people are being wrongly sort of persecuted for something that you believe has real medicinal value and real therapeutic value, I think it's about taking a stand and making something happen. And so this is kind of one example over the years, and there's many others.
Oh, I love that, because it must be, they say when you're doing what you're passionate, you never really feel like you're working, right? I'm not saying that it doesn't get hectic or a little bit overwhelming at times, but you genuinely still love to do what you do each day. Because there's a purpose. And so I feel like a story like that is incredible, because it really showcases your humanity and why you would easily keep moving forward. So I'm glad you have. Kind of shifting to challenges facing the cannabis industry in 2022. the quality of human resources. How do you see some of the organizations, and I mean, there are people in our audience. I have a lot of friends who are in cannabis business themselves. So, quality of human resources does seem to be an issue right now. How is your company handling it or kind of tackling that issue moving into 2022?
So quality of human resources, I mean, I'm assuming you're talking about like kind of hiring and recruiting the best. And so
Right.
on our side, I think, we see a lot of success by, just reaching out to, I think for any business, right? Hiring is always going to be the most difficult aspect, but also one of the most important, because your product, your community is only, as good as your team. And so on our side, there's a lot of work that goes into reaching out to players, not only within cannabis, but also people with proven successes in places like Shopify, Facebook, Complex, and others. At the end of the day, there's a lot of interviewing, a ton of outreach. It takes a ton of work. Where we see the most success now is really just people internally on our team referring friends of theirs that are really quality people. And I think that at the end of the day, kind of similar fish swim together. And so our focus is on really leveraging our amazing team and hiring their friends as much as possible.
Yeah, obviously it's important. I love when I do go into a cannabis store and I'm able to say, this is my issues. And I know that the person is giving me authentic knowledge, because I'm very knowledge driven, and sure. When they're able to actually speak in a way that lets me know you are taking the time to understand what this product can do and how it benefits me. It's not this experience like you're walking in, handing money off and getting it's a real experience. And there is a great resignation happening right now. A lot of companies are struggling to keep people employed at all, let alone people who do understand the ins and outs of the different strains and benefits of cannabis, because it's not just it's a chemistry. My husband's knowledge on it, I blow. And there's another one of my friends, shout out to Sabrina, with Cali FX, they the way she speaks of it, I'm like, you should be wearing a lab coat, and it's just so incredible, because I admire somebody who can speak very eloquently on a product like that. So it shows a lot. Okay, limited banking opportunities. A lot of people don't realize that you cannot just go into a bank and say, I have a cannabis industry business, and they're going to open an account for you, because federal regulations forbids FDIC businesses to, in fact, all of them. Like, even if I had there's a limit on what type of accounts you can open, and even legitimate businesses will struggle. I went through that before. So how does your organization suggest for other organizations to kind of work around, or what's really been the number one way to work around that, or top suggestions?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, Herb largely exists online as a community, helping connect up brands and consumers online. So we don't actually handle the plant itself, so avoid a lot of the stickiness that exists around the Banking Act and those regulations. That said, from friends of mine that are on the retail side of things, I know there's enormous challenges due to the fact that the Safe Banking Act has still not been passed, and many of these businesses are holding mass amounts of cash. And so how they're currently dealing with that is, I think they're struggling with it. Which is why these laws really need to change. I just had a couple friends over the last couple of years that have been, robbed and have had different break-ins at their businesses due just to the mass amount of cash that people know that they're holding. So I think this is a real issue, and this is a business that in an industry it's growing fast, and on the banking side, it's prehistoric how it's currently being handled today. So definitely a lot of change that's needed there. And in terms of recommendations, I think it's really it's a tough industry right now, given where things are at. It's still very early days on the banking side.
I gotta say, my ex-husband and I used to own Metro PCS stores, and it was a very cash heavy business, because you'd have a lot of people coming. And Bank of America would keep shutting down our damn account. They're like, you guys keep putting in all this cash. So it's not as simple as just go put it in the bank. And if you're a business, especially if you already know you're in like a, they've got their eye on you type of thing, and you are trying to cross all your T's and dot all your I's, where are you going to put it? Crime right now. So, and that's the other thing, the reason why I brought up doing the Metro, or why owning the Metro PCS stores. Sorry, I promise I can talk, you guys. The one thing about having a small to medium-sized business in this country is the minute there is an economic recession, let me tell you who feels it first. We do. And we did. And we also experienced a lot more break-ins. Desperation pushes people to whole new lengths during an economic crisis. Now, you may have money, you and me and the audience may have money for our rent, but there's a lot of people out there who don't. And stealing is one of those ways. So we would notice our break-ins would go up substantially. And I just knowing the logistics of a space when you rent, you can't have like a safe built into the floor. It's so expensive. It's not your property really. I mean, it's unless you have like a 30-year lease or something. I mean, that's a lot of investment to just keep yourself safe, where you still have people come in and put a gun to your head and say, open the safe, right? So I feel like the reason I'm saying that is because I feel like what you're bringing up is how they're really endangering the lives of people who are just trying to run a business, so
for sure. I mean, these are normal businesses like anyone. Just the only issue is that they have nowhere to put a lot of the cash that they're collecting, right? So there's huge risks there, and that combined with, in some cities like San Francisco as an example, you're seeing really a lack of persecution for people that are doing this vandalizing and the shoplifting and the crime in the city on a large scale. And so you're really just inviting these businesses with targets on their back to go and get, robbed. And so, it's a real issue. And I know that a lot of entrepreneurs are really feeling the pain there and not feeling safe. And so, there's a lot of innovation and sort of progression that needs to happen in that area of the industry for sure.
Agreed. So part of that is its classification. Its classification as a drug still creates this barrier that will only be reduced through voting to keep cannabis regulations similar to other business regulations. How is that journey going for people like yourself that are, advocating for those changes?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, I know a lot of people voted Biden in on the, premise that he would be, super friendly to cannabis legalization and make this part of the mandate eventually. I think it's been kind of quiet over the last bit. Understandably, with COVID, obviously there were some other priorities, but I think there's very much a need for this conversation to get moving. I've been seeing, as an example, just a couple weeks back on Twitter, Chuck Schumer made a comment, around 71% of Americans approving of cannabis legalization, and that times need to change. And I thought it was funny. A particular entrepreneur that I know had commented on it saying like, that's like, you're right, it needs to change. This is kind of common knowledge, but this is your job to make it change, get to work, and I think there's sometimes this just a lack of action around it, right? It's clear that the American public it agrees that it should be legalized en masse. I think many people are voting in a party that they believe will take action on it. And then there's just nothing. Right. So at this stage, I know that there's a lot of groundwork being done by organizations like LPP and Reform, MPP, and others. But I think just more and more awareness around this, and more people just en masse kind of creating a movement around it, where these politicians really need to answer to like what's going on with this topic that we know is important to so many Americans and is affecting in a negative way so many families across the US, and it's time for a change.
I agree. If I am a person who wants to take action, is the best thing. I mean, where do you start? Do you write your local congressman? Do you write the governor? I mean, where do you start in at least doing one thing? I get it. Not everyone can go up to Sacramento and testify in front of, the administration, but clearly there has to be something you can do. So where do we start?
Yeah, so there's a lot of petitions that exist on sites like Last Prisoner Project. So if you go to lastprisonerproject.org, there's a lot of a 3-step action plan as to how you can help today, whether it's donations, awareness, or writing particular people in office, which they give you kind of clear directions there. I think that's one step. And I think it also just comes down to, just raising our voices, right? I think if people don't let this slide and continue to kind of make cannabis legalization an important part of, a movement that needs to happen, I think, times will eventually change. But we're definitely seeing a little bit of a slow progression of it, at least slower than I'd like to see it.
I agree, because you brought up earlier the VA conversation, and this is definitely one of the most significant areas where I see it's a tragedy as well, aside from really the criminalization of it. But it's that if you've served this country, if you went through that and you gave up your, entire existence for a certain amount of years to go defend this country, and in any way, shape, or form that changed you. And I'm going to tell you one thing. My first partner was a U.S. Air Force engineer. And I'm saying that because I remember going into his notebooks and seeing his boot camp training notes. And it was through reading these notes that I came to understand they really tear you down mentally in order to rebuild you. I mean, it's like cancer, right? Like, I'm not, in the same process. It's like, we need to rebuild you. We need to build you like we want you to. So let's start at ground zero. And they dismantle a lot of things that we traditionally see as normal to say, no, you have to be able to do this. And I'm even going to say my stepfather, who was a Marine, fought in the Vietnam War. He was, you couldn't even light a match in the house, Matthew. Like, he was so traumatized from what he went through, and used to say, it was them or us, and all these things that would happen. So to my point, if you have served this country and you've gone through any significant or even it doesn't matter, trauma as a result of that, I don't see why they want to continue to deny veterans the opportunity to have it, because they refuse to offer it. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't mean to say anything that's not true, I feel like in some cases, well, at least I know with the Medi-Cal system in California, if you use cannabis, you can lose all of your benefits. And I feel like the VA, they kind of put them on that same tether of, they still consider cannabis a drug, so you jeopardize your livelihood if you don't follow their rules, and it's not necessarily to their benefit. How has Herb been able to kind of, or how do you guys see yourselves, actually more speaking to the challenges facing the cannabis industry still in 2022, how do we still empower the veterans?
Yeah, I think, it's a lot about kind of telling the stories that exist. I think a lot of people, due to the stigma around it and, the lack of education around cannabis, don't even realize the real issues that are being faced by veterans. It's something like every minute you have a veteran attempting suicide. And, we know that for things like PTSD and some other conditions that they're suffering from, that, cannabis can be a great option. I think, across the board, there's many examples of these veterans being left out to dry when they've made the ultimate sacrifice for the country abroad. And we certainly aren't doing enough, and there's a lot more that needs to happen. And I think, cannabis is just one part of that kind of conversation. On the herb side of things, we look to kind of tell these stories, get the awareness out there of people that are being impacted, and hope to just raise more awareness to tell these stories and educate the public on a lot of the issues that these people are facing. And I think there's a long road to go. I think it's all tied up into this broader issue of just, with cannabis legalization, you would have more studies being done. You would have the ability for the VA to do more with it. But due to the fact that it's being so demonized and it's illegal, and a Schedule I drug as illegal as, heroin and cocaine in the US, which, as a Schedule I drug too, they're saying that there's no medical potential for it. It's impacting many communities, and it's sad to see how many veterans are being left out to dry because of these outdated laws.
Agreed. Wow. It hits me hard, because when you know what it is to go from one state and really experience something that changes you, you want other people to experience the same benefits. And when you know that it's just being held back for no good reason, truly, because at one point in history, cannabis, just like, many tribal things that were used, has been around for so long. So anyway, okay, moving to this next, not anyway, because I love what you've said. I want to thank you so much. Effective digital marketing strategy. If we can talk about this, 14 million plus community, that's amazing. I'm sure you have created this through many different levels of marketing and strategy, but for people in 2022 still also, once again, facing some challenges, because I know not all platforms will let you promote cannabis necessarily before they try to take it down, or block you or suppress you.
Yep.
So how do you find an effective way to do your stuff?
Yeah, so cannabis is a really tricky space. You have platforms like Facebook, Google, and Instagram making it impossible to advertise anything cannabis related, again, due to the fact that it's a Schedule I drug. And so, many brands find that they're, creating Instagram accounts, they're promoting it over many years and wake up one morning to see it shut down. So it's a very tricky space, and it's sad to see the amount of entrepreneurs that are doing good, honest work and not able to build their brands due to these really strict regulations and terms and conditions on these platforms. With Herb, we've always kind of been a little bit more safe with how we build a community. For us, it's always been around creating really educational content and following both the data on one side in terms of what's resonating with our community and what gets them really excited and jazzed up and causes them to share content. And then the other side of things, just having a very intricate understanding of the line that exists on platforms like Google, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, so that any of the content you're putting out there is on side, and that you don't have to worry about your page being shut down. We've built a community of 10.5 million now on Facebook, over 1 million on Instagram as an example, and are verified on both platforms. So that gives us a bit of an unfair advantage now, having been doing this for 7 years. For new people just getting started, though, I think it comes down to leaning into some of the areas where there's an intersection with cannabis, right? So when you think about cannabis consumers these days, not only are they using cannabis, but there's maybe an intersection with things like art, design, travel, culture, coffee, food, music, and potentially looking at where you can extend your brand into those areas and highlight those aspects of cannabis, I think is much more safe, and also in many ways much more with the times, as many cannabis consumers are not defined by their cannabis use. It's just a part of their lives, but they do many of these other things that I just mentioned. So, I think it's leading with content that's on side the terms and conditions of these platforms, and getting innovative with things like SEO, email strategies, content strategies, and then following the data after you've put a lot out there to see what's working best. And that's kind of what we've done at Herb, and through over 15 pieces of content a day for the last 7 years, we've really been able to dial in our strategies and what works best.
That's incredible. I love that you said that, because I've found I play with my content, because I am a creative, and it's interesting that I love figuring out what people want, right? And I've found that they do want to be educated. They want to learn. But they also want to see something that evokes, sometimes it's about seeing a post that, even if you're an advocate, you don't always know how to advocate for something. You don't know how to advocate for cannabis because you don't have all the information. So like, I love how you're like, through education, and I can only imagine the different ways. But to the point of where there is a will, there is a way, you are an example of someone who's really been able to hone into that with, like you said, integrity. Because I've always done that. I'm like, I'm not buying this. I want my community to be real. I want it to be people that, connected with me for a reason, my mission, and all of those things. So I love that, that's at the forefront of what you're doing. One last question on the technicalities of the challenges before I kind of have you give us your last words. Gun legislation is another challenge still, right? With the ATF form 4473, this mandatory form that if you actually go to buy a firearm, you will be denied if you acknowledge that you are a cannabis user. So you have people, I mean, what does that leave people to do? Lie on the application or not have a gun? Which I thought that was in the Constitution, that we have the right to bear arms. Is that not in there somewhere? I remember that, maybe that part of law school, but I know that that's supposed to be a big thing. And if you're telling me that using cannabis is the logic there that because I use cannabis, I'm going to be out of control and I might just get a hair up my ass and go out there and take my gun and shoot people? Is that what you think is driving that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, again, like there seems to be just a really big disconnect, today between where the public mindset is at with regards to cannabis, where, sweeping across the U.S., we have legalization state by state, public opinions change largely, people want to see it legalized. And then, the outdated laws that we see in place, whether it's the laws we've talked about with the VA, the laws in terms of locking people up for cannabis for life without parole, or these gun laws that you see in many states. And so I think it's in many cases creating like shackles on human consciousness, right? Like exactly like what you're saying. Are you supposed to go and lie to the government that you don't consume cannabis in order to get a firearm, or are you supposed to be truthful and then get denied something that is your right? And so it's an interesting time right now, and I think that things need to change for sure. And, I think it's just another example of laws that just don't make sense, that are super outdated, and that it's about time for a change.
I agree. And we're in America, so, our language doesn't make sense. Try teaching your toddlers why K sometimes spells as K and why the sound is also sometimes CH, right? Like it's a very interesting, we can often be quite hypocritical of ourselves. But I appreciate your words, and I'm so glad that you had said it the way that you did. I can't wait for some good sound bites from this interview. Last words. Well, actually, before I have you do last words, where do people get in touch, support? I know you are the CEO, but where would you like to send people to support your mission and what you're doing?
Yeah, so people can find our website is www.herb.co. And on the social side of things, it's at herb on socials. And if there's anyone in the audience that I can help out with, or help them land a job in cannabis or answer any questions, they're welcome to email me directly. I'm easy to get a hold of, matt@herb.co. And and for those that are interested in helping out with Last Prisoner Project and making an impact on the 40,000 people that are incarcerated for cannabis in the US, they can go and check out lastprisonerproject.org and take action today.
Yes, and shout out to Dante West, who is involved in that. My husband and I sat down as we want to help on the production side of that, just moving through the pandemic, like you said, and so many things going on, but just an amazing young man and an amazing, incredible organization. Real quick, also, rapid fire questions. You got time for just 5 quick ones?
Let's do it.
Let's do it? Okay. Cannonball in the pool or dip a toe in first?
Definitely cannonball in the pool. Go all in.
I
Make a splash.
see you. I'm seeing all cannonball. Okay. Street smarts or book smarts?
If you have to pick one, I think street smarts. Book smarts only get you so far. You got to kind of take it to the streets and really cut your teeth.
I love it. And then there's nothing better than a street smart person who goes and gets some book smarts, right? Then you're both. Yep. Then you're just, unstoppable. Would you rather fly or have super strength?
I definitely just rather fly. I think that's, just get anywhere quickly. I love to travel. So being able to fly anywhere, anytime is kind of a good deal, I think.
I'm with you on that for sure. Money or happiness?
Happiness for sure. Money only gets you so far.
Love it. If you were to write a book, what would it be about?
If I were to write a book, I think it would be a book to, someone that's in like my 17-year-old self, and some advice that I have for the younger generation navigating sort of entrepreneurship, the world today post-COVID, and how to go out there and find their calling.
I love it. Well, in that vein, then, give us your last words on how do you go out there and find your calling?
Yeah, I think it's about, it's a lot of an inward journey, right? Paying attention to, what really makes you tick, what your calling is in life. I think for me, I've been able to find this over the years from a lot of reading, things like meditation help a lot to understand understand yourself better. I'm an avid journaler and believe in, waking up, writing 3 pages a day to slowly discover your inner self and your inner artist. And I think the path to finding your calling is largely a spiritual journey. So, taking time to be out in nature, taking time to take care of yourself, take care of your health, and you leave yourself open to discovering what really makes you tick. So that's my 2 cents.
I love it. Well, I'm so thankful that you are on the journey with your calling, and I feel like it's only going to continue to evolve over time. You said your age, you're still a baby, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just I'm 46, so whenever I hear you, I'm like, but I mean that you have so much in front of you. It's an honor and a privilege to collaborate with you and have you the first person on Unsugarcoated with Aalia to actually speak truly effectively and efficiently on cannabis the way that you did. I appreciate it, and I definitely look forward to seeing you on the flip side of 2022.
Yeah, no, grateful for you as well. Thank you so much for your time. This was awesome.
Thank you so much, Matt. All right. Well, to the rest of our audience at home, I just want to say thank you for being here. I hope you've enjoyed our amazing guest, Mr. Matt Gray. Please do tap in with him. And be sure to be back next week for the next episode. Thanks so much for letting us be Unsugarcoated. Take care. Bye-bye.
What are you still doing here? Come back next week.